Admire the tartan fridge. See the petrol-powered iron. Flush the see-through toilet. Watch an elephant stand on a fridge. Listen to the clockwork burglar alarm. Break into a safe. Spot the bimbo. And see the land where knobs hardly ever fall off. My gallery at the Science Museum, The Secret Life of the Home, finally closed last year. I decided to make this video about it, partly as a record for myself — it was the largest job I've ever taken on — but also for the gallery's many fans, and in the hope that it might help curators in the future trying to make their own collections more accessible. When I got the job, I was so excited because the museum has a fabulous collection of household gadgets, but the managers never seemed that interested in them. Though to me they seemed really accessible and had lots of potential to engage with people. They were familiar to people. So when I got the job, I felt like a kid let loose in a toy shop. And one of the first things I did was to go out and buy a nice milling machine and a lathe. I've had them ever since, and I still use them almost every day. Well, at the time, the museum's collection was called the Domestic Appliances Gallery, and it did look rather dated. It was crammed with objects, which I liked. So my idea was just basically to get rid of the Victorian wallpaper, make the labels more interesting, and add as many interactive exhibits as I could, and hopefully squash even more objects into the space. This is the first showcase I started on. They just let me loose on the collection of irons. And you can see on the left, that's how it all started with that stove would have been from a stately home or something, and they had lots of irons to iron out all the bedding and tablecloths and stuff, and they just put them on top of the stove, and then more modern ones. And I was trying to think what style to display them, and what tricks I could do with them. So down the bottom here, I just left an iron on a bit of synthetic fabric to see what would happen, and then I shorted out the thermostat on this one, and just to see what would happen to the iron. Rather attractive, really, in some funny way. And I also started taking the things to bits to show what was inside the different gadgets. So anyway, this was the one that I did to start with, and I showed the museum what I'd done, and it was good enough for them, so they said we'll do another showcase. So and I think actually this was the next one I did, was the Teasmaids. Enormous enthusiasm for Teasmaids. On the left, up at the top, an old percolator, renowned for producing rather disgusting stewed coffee. And down the bottom there's a rather sci-fi looking espresso machine. At the time all sorts of gadgets were called atomic to make them sound sciencey and futuristic. I've even got some atomic draft proofing strip at home from the same era. Then on the right, down the bottom, it's a wonderful clockwork Teasmaid Victorian thing, and another rather more elaborate one next to it that actually the clock opens a gas tap and turns on the gas to heat the water. But they didn't really become popular until the 1930s, the electric Teasmaids. And a surprising number of people collect these things. I can see why. They are rather beautiful. So then over here we've got all the kind of the history of heating, really. The museum has quite a large heating collection. It starts with ancient wood and coal fires and stoves. I particularly like this oddity. It's actually designed to sit inside a tin bath to heat up the water. In the late 19th century, the first gas heaters started to appear. Gas heating used a lot more gas than lighting, so the heaters were very expensive to run, so they didn't become that popular at first. Then in the early 20th century, electric heaters started to appear. These were even more expensive to run. So to persuade people that these were desirable must-have objects, both advertising was important, but also design. So they are wonderfully varied and creative, the designs. Extraordinary things. An intense rivalry developed between the different fuels: electric, gas, oil and solid fuel. It was through the 20th century people gradually kept their houses warmer and warmer, culminating with central heating in the 50s and 60s. But people missed the coziness of a coal fire. So there became quite a market for imitation coal effect gas and electric fires, and I'm delighted that the museum has quite a sizable collection of these, which is what I ended the case with. On the other side of this corridor is the collection of washing machines. The collection starts with a few Victorian hand-powered washing machines. But it was really the arrival of practical electric motors that made the idea take off. This green one is an American one made by Thor in 1929. Powered by pixies, obviously. All the electric machines had mangles to squeeze the wash clothes through to dry them. People so often caught their fingers in them that some hospitals had regular mangle clinics. The first automatic machines appeared in the 1960s. Initially so expensive, they were up to £5,000 in today's money. Here is a US Bendix on the left and a Hoover Keymatic. Then prices started to fall dramatically, led in Britain by the twin tub, this one particularly made by Rolls. At the back of the gallery there's the collection of refrigerators. Originally they were just wooden boxes that you tipped some ice into, and then this classic General Electric designed. Earlier fridges leaked their smelly ammonia or sulfur dioxide refrigerants, so couldn't be kept in the kitchen. This was the first to have a whole compressor unit, which is inside the coil at the top, completely hermetically sealed so none of the gases could escape. And fridges have been made like this ever since. But these ones were really built to last. I don't actually know when they stopped making them, but certainly I've seen 2 or 3 in homes in San Francisco that were still in regular use. And miraculously, the sign I made is actually still working. It's all frosty. The guy I met, who's a refrigeration engineer, took a shine to the idea, and I think probably he's kept it going, amazingly. Then we made this fridge. We cut it in half just to show the insulation initially, but then we added all these jokes of the products that were inside, which was great fun. Then there was this interactive with the 2 copper coils. One got warmer and the other got cooler as you turned the handle. Of course, this is what's happening in a fridge, where the cold coils are inside the fridge and the warm coils are outside the back. Opposite the fridges, there's a case called Personal Care and Comfort. Quite a mix of different objects. There's a selection of bed heaters and electric hot water bottles along the top. Electric blankets are a bit too dull to display, but I do love this one's box. Hair dryers down this side, then there are health lamps and curling tongs below them, and massage machines along the bottom. I do love the 1930s ones that look just like science fiction ray guns. Cookers on the other side here. At first, both gas and electric cookers were designed to look like the familiar coal-fired kitchen ranges. Initially, gas cookers had the lead. This 1923 New World H16 was the very first to have an oven thermostat. So for the first time, food could be cooked at a precise temperature. The first electric cookers were very slow at cooking, they're sometimes not very safe, and always very, very expensive to run, despite the claims of their extensive advertising. They remained slow until the introduction of ceramic hobs in the 80s and 90s. The porridge in there used to bubble all the time, that's a casualty, but it has been bubbling for at least 25 years. I like the collection of toasters. Surprisingly, toasters were almost the first electric product to be marketed after lighting. At first, only large houses had electricity, and the time it took servants to bring the toast from the kitchen up to the table meant it was always cold. The first pop-up toasters were sold as robot toasters. We put some food on top of some of the cookers, obviously with bits spilt as well. And then, I like this thing. This was my interactive exhibit I built about microwave cookers. So what's going on in here? I made a fiberglass chicken and stuck lots of tiny little neon bulbs inside, glued to the surface. And what it's showing is that microwaves aren't heating the whole space inside uniformly, they're heating little hot spots. And so as the chicken rotates, you can see all these different hot spots. But I wasn't expecting that to work when I made it. Next, there's the museum's collection of toilets. Everything from simple communal loos to advanced Japanese ones with control panels that squirt water to clean your private parts. Some of the adverts are wild too. Now, this case is opposite the gallery's main entrance, and there's a story behind that. I'd originally wanted to make an entrance arch of bits of old washing machines and cookers and stuff, but the designer of the education centre, the gallery next door, didn't want anything impinging on his precious space. But fortunately, one of the museum's in-house designers then perked up and said, well, it doesn't really matter what people see around the entrance, it's what they see when they look inside. So that's when I decided to put the toilets opposite the main entrance. And I spent the money that I'd allocated for the arch on a quite complicated interactive exhibit. Perhaps my favourite exhibit, the flushing loo. You can see the turd in the bottom, and when you flush the loo, the turd would go round the bend, and you'd see the cistern empty and everything. But the good fun bit was if you waited for about 30 seconds, then you'd see a mechanical lever lift the turd out from in there and drop it back in the pan. So going on here, history of lighting over here. And this little room, this is my home security room in here. It's sort of how burglar alarms and things work. Oh, this is fun. I don't know if this is still working. If anything set off the alarm, this contraption would automatically dial 999. You can see the old-fashioned telephone dial down the bottom. It was all electromechanical. And then it played the record.
These premises are being broken into. Police, Scotland Yard. Police, Scotland Yard. Police, Scotland Yard. This is a Burgot automatic burglar alarm operating.
Because most of the room is about today's security, electronic security. There's a bit about passive infrared detectors, motion sensors that I find fascinating, and also simpler things like tamper-proof wiring, so you break the wire and that will set off the alarm. I'm sad though that this door is blocked off. This led through to another fairly small room, which was the locks and fastenings gallery. I really didn't need to do much to that gallery. I felt it was already so entertaining. particularly the giant locks in the centre made by the museum workshops. Beautiful things that were great fun to use, and you could just puzzle out completely how they worked just by looking at them. No idea why the museum closed that off. This was some time ago. Anyway, you exited that room by double doors, automatic doors, which I left the mechanism exposed so you could see how they worked, and got back into the main space. Oh, this is interesting. This comes all the way from the children's gallery, which was here when I was in the museum when I was a child, and I was obsessed by this automatic door, and so I managed to persuade them to let me put it back in the gallery. I don't know if it's going to work. Oh, yes, it does. A ridiculously elaborate, complicated system to make the door work. And this is the collection of vacuum cleaners. All the first vacuum cleaners were just hand or foot powered and weren't very effective. The first electric ones were industrial looking contraptions, but they soon evolved into the familiar shapes. The classic one with the bag at the back sucked all the dirt through the fan before it got to the bag. Not a very good idea, because the fan blades had to be very tough, so they couldn't be very aerodynamic. So the suction wasn't that strong. Actually, they were quite effective because they also had a rotating brush to dislodge the dirt. Later ones, like the cylinder vacs, dirt gets trapped in the bag and it's only clean air goes through the fan, so the blades can be much more efficient and the suction is stronger. Getting on to the 90s, I'd forgotten that robot vacuum cleaners had come in so early. They were around when we were making the gallery. The case ends with an early Japanese Dyson vacuum cleaner given to the museum by the man himself. I was talking to a guy who repairs these machines, and he loves Dysons because he said he'd go bankrupt without them. They go wrong so often and cost so much money. People always get them repaired. A simple interactive about how electric motors work here. I'm amazed the sign's still working. Simple little synchronous motors working continuously for 30 years. Amazing. Then this corridor is all about radio, hi-fi and TV, home entertainment. So much has changed in this field in the last 30 years that this does now look dated. On the left side there are exhibits about the components, the technology behind it, but this is my favourite one. A little generator that you can just about see the coil of the speaker move. Pretty amazing it worked, taking half of it to bits. Then I made a giant model of a CD player showing how a laser can detect the pits in the disc. There's a beautiful model I found in the museum stores of how a single needle can produce stereo sound in a vinyl record. At the end there's a display of valves, which are astonishingly beautiful things, such variety, but of course only rarely used today. On the other side of the corridor there's a case all about sound reproduction. Now this starts on the left here with a model of Edison's original phonograph from 1877 that recorded on a wax cylinder. It's astonishing how loud phonographs and early gramophones could be, just with a simple horn, without any electronics whatsoever. The first records were 78 RPM and only played for a couple of minutes or so. When electronic valve amplifiers were introduced, they were a lot more sensitive, allowing the grooves in the record to be much smaller. Still, it wasn't till the late 40s that the 33 RPM format that plays for over half an hour was finally introduced, and of course the smaller 45 RPM format. Stereo didn't appear till 1958, but then rapidly became universal. Digital technology came in the 1980s. This Sharp Music Centre from 1980 wasn't quite as digital as it claimed. In fact, it's almost entirely analogue inside. But Only a couple of years later, this is Philips' first CD player from 1983, genuinely completely digital.
Now going back in history with the radios.
The first radio, crystal sets, needed no battery or external power. They just had very long aerials and extracted the energy of the radio signals in the air. Amazing it worked, really. So when radios that plugged into the mains with valves and things first appeared, they were a great novelty, and they could have loudspeakers rather than just the earphones of the earlier sets. Since then, radios have shrunk, particularly in the 1960s with the advent of transistors and transistor radios. We actually made a separate display case for car radios, early camcorders and other devices transformed by transistor electronics.
More old tellies. That's an original Baird mechanical scan telly up the top there.
The first cathode ray tube tellies with their tiny screens looked like oscilloscopes. You could even buy kits to make one yourself. Over time, screens gradually became larger and the electronics smaller. But in 1995, when the gallery opened, flat LCD screens were still in the future.
Then I wanted to include this case about DIY. When I was 11, my godmother gave me an electric drill. My parents were terrified, but it was the best present I ever had as a child, and I loved using it and buying all the accessories for it. We just bought the one motor tool and all the accessories for it.
Sadly, they haven't replaced the lights in the showcase, so it's difficult to see, but the large object at the back is actually an electric drill-powered concrete mixer.
The sewing machines, they're beautiful machines.
They don't actually have the first lock-stitch machine from 1846, but this is an early model of one made shortly afterwards. But only a few years later, Singer produced his first machine, an industrial-looking thing, 1850. Sewing machines were really the first machine of any sort to enter the home, and it was felt that because of that they should look more decorative, and that's the origin of all the wonderful decoration and gilt work on Victorian sewing machines. Singer maintained its dominance right up until the arrival of cheaper Japanese imports in the 1960s. Sewing machines continued to be built with traditional ingenious mechanisms and beautiful cams still comparatively recently, but today of course a lot of it has been replaced with electronics and stepper motors.
I've got an old Bernina, my favourite. We also started collecting early computer games. I just went to car boot sales and picked them up for £1, and even when I was buying them I thought this is going to be worth shed loads of money once it's in a case at the Science Museum. It was a surreal experience. And we even managed to get an old version of Pong working. And even more miraculously, it's still working 29 years later.
That just about completes the showcases, but at some point when I was working on the whole thing, I felt it needed a bit of additional decoration. So we added some objects suspended from the ceiling that sprang to life as you got close. A man in the toilet, a kettle scale monster, an iron that works upside down, a hand trapped in a blender, and my favourite, the flying hot water bottles.
So coming back here to say goodbye to the gallery actually makes me feel sadder and more upset that it's closing. People obviously still really enjoy it. And I found that the museum are just lying about the things not being fixable. the maintenance people were told not to fix some of the exhibits. They've been planning it for a long time. But I shouldn't be surprised, even when I was working here, the museum is a strange place. And really it's all part of the history of the big museums in London. There's a thing in the 70s that the rows of mahogany showcases with endless objects was old-fashioned and fuddy-duddy. And so they got designers in and tried to modernise everything. And basically they got rid of lots of exhibits and lots of designer spaces and galleries that sort of had a single narrative going through them. At the time that was sort of fresh, but it became a sort of new orthodoxy that I feel the museum has sort of got trapped in. And one of the things I was proud of at the time, The Secret Life of the Home, was that I managed to cram at least 25% more exhibits into the space than had been there before. So the other crazy thing about the way the museum works, and not specific to me, is that they've never been good at keeping old galleries together. They tend to just leave them, they don't update them. In the past, museums always just constantly updated bits and pieces. But the new style, or the 70s style, seems to be that you just gut everything and put in something completely different. And it's often shallower and less informative than what they've taken out, to my eyes. This is all my personal opinion. And I think that's a shame, really. So, yeah, so it's a sad day. It's nice to see people enjoying it, and I've been touched by all the people from the maintenance department who came to say hello. So, goodbye, Secret Life of the Home. Well, now it's a few months later, and I've sort of calmed down and accepted it. My life's very different now. I run this little arcade and make the amusement machines for it. And looking back, I feel more positive about the whole experience of making the gallery. I was amazed, really, looking back, just how much freedom I had to do absolutely whatever I wanted. The museum was so focused on the expensive education centre they were building next door that they really just left me alone. It wasn't supposed to be a separate gallery most of the time, just some sort of annex to their education centre. But at the last minute, the marketing department stepped in and thought it could have a wider audience. Ordinary visitors might like it. And that's when it became The Secret Life of the Home. But I think then some of the management were quite miffed that they'd had no say in it, no influence on it, and it certainly wasn't part of the museum's grand plan. So then when the gallery became popular with the public, it was quite hard for them to get rid of it. But given all that, it's still quite amazing that it managed to last for the whole 29 years. So that was one thing. But the other thing was the whole experience had a big influence on what I've done ever since. So though I really enjoyed doing it all, I became aware of both the problems of working on such a large scale, but also of working with a big institution. So working on a large scale, it just meant that I had to spend longer in my office, doing sort of project management. And I was giving all the jobs I really wanted to do myself to other people, to my friends. And then with the large institution, I gradually realised just how bureaucratic the place was. At the time, I was well shielded by my allies, but when I went on to do subsequent jobs for museums, the bureaucracy really got me down. And that's when I jumped ship to set up by myself, running my arcades. And really, working on a much smaller scale suits me better, with much more independence. So to end, I can tell you I ran out of space here. I've been doing it for 20 years now, making these arcade machines, and started a second arcade in London, and so I'm ending with a short film about it.